Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. Today I want to talk about a recent Criterion release in 4K UHD, an upgrade of Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, an upgrade from the Blu-ray which was released in 2016. So I never owned this film on Blu-ray, and in fact I've never seen this film before. Kurosawa would make two more movies after this film. He hadn't made a movie since 1985's Ron. He was 80 years old, and we'll get to how this film eventually came to be made, how it got financing, because it's a very unique film for Kurosawa, who was known for great narratives, The Seven Samurai, Akira, narratives that were very novelistic. They were often constructed like symphonies, so you could feel a first act, a second act a bit slower, a third act where the pace quickens. But here we have a non-narrative. We have 8 dreams. Are they dreams? They seem more like fantasies, very much autobiographical fantasies. So this is non-narrative, non-traditional, what you would not have expected from Kurosawa, especially after the elaborate extravaganza of Ron 5 years before. But we do have some consistency running through this film, and that is what the Japanese call the I character. And the I character in Dreams is Kurosawa himself. And the first 2 segments here are Kurosawa as a child, and we get a fantasia of a fox. A procession of foxes roaming through the forest, and the little boy's not supposed to be there. Fox weddings are taboo and only come out when there is a sun shower. And then the second one involves a peach orchard, and where this same little boy, Kurosawa as a little boy, encounters the doll-like figures during this doll festival, and Kurosawa played with his older sister with these dolls. And on the day of the doll festival, his sister, who had died and who he was very close to, leads him into the forest where we have the peach orchard that has been cut down by the I character's parents. But now the forest reappears as a doll-like figure. So we have these sort of fantastical sequences, and very much they involve processions. We have the fox procession, or we have the dolls coming to life on a tiered hillside. Very much we're seeing a spectacle of color, of memory, of imagination, nature, our place in nature. What is man's place within nature? Human beings have become estranged from nature. Nature might well take its revenge. So, and then we have, as in the ensuing 6 sequences, we now have the I character, Kurosawa, as an adult. He was a mountain climber. We get a terrifyingly, very densely photographed blizzard where mountaineers are trapped in a blizzard. This is a sequence that comes to mind, one of Kurosawa's great themes of perseverance, of always keep going, keep trying. A masculine world. Kurosawa was criticized often that he had no concept of women. All his films are about masculinity and hero, the masculine hero. But we see a manifestation of masculinity in the following sequence, which is set in the aftermath of World War II, where we get another procession of dead soldiers coming through a tunnel, encountering their platoon leader, who evidently is alive. It's a very terrifying sequence, and this is where Honda comes into play. Honda as we see in the supplements, he's on the set at all times. He's right behind Kurosawa. But for this segment, Honda served many years in the military, and he saw unspeakable horrors of war. Kurosawa was not in the war. He was, his father, a friend of his father's, exempted Kurosawa in the 1930s, and by the end of the war, he was conscripted, but he did not ever serve. In fact, he was making movies during the war. So he didn't know about the horrors of war. And in fact, you can see some of his movies, especially his samurai movies, as made by somebody who did not actually participate in the war, especially in contrast to, say, Kobayashi's The Human Condition, who actually saw the horrors of masculinity up close and personal. So he relies on Honda here to choreograph this procession, and then we get a kind of reverie of art, of painting. Kurosawa wanted to be a painter when he was a young man, but because he didn't think he'd ever make a living at it, he went into filmmaking instead, and he admired Vincent van Gogh. And so we see the eye character in a museum looking at Van Gogh's paintings, and then he goes into the world of Vincent van Gogh. And this is just an extraordinary sequence. And Martin Scorsese, of all people, turns up playing Vincent van Gogh in this fantasy. But now we go back to Japanese history, Japanese trauma, again, with a sequence where nuclear reactors are exploding. We see a Honda, the director Honda, like scenes of hundreds of people chaotically running in terror. And then in the following sequence, we see the results of nuclear destruction, deformed creatures, ghoulish demons who feed on themselves. So again, we're getting a sense of the post-war trauma and the fear of what may yet be to come. Japan having been the country that had absorbed nuclear bombs, 2 nuclear bombs, and nuclear fallout. But then we end up with a very colorful ecological finale where the eye character wanders into a village that was from the past, and it was actually a village that Kurosawa knew very well. I think his relatives had lived in a similar type village, and he meets an old man who explains how they don't need electricity. This village does not need electricity. We're now in the here and now, and but they're living. This village is living a simple life without all the destructive forces of science and the ongoing civilizations. And this old man's played by Shishu Ryu. Another casting coup. This is probably the casting coup of the movie because he is so familiar, especially to American audiences, through the films of Yasujiro Ozu. So how did this film get to be made? Now, Kurosawa had worked for Toho Studio for almost his entire career, but they would not finance it. Even though Ron and his previous film, Kagemusha, were big successes, they were not seen as financial, commercial successes from the standpoint of the studio. So Steven Spielberg read the script. He went to Warner Brothers for financing. George Lucas comes up with assistance as well at cost. The digital effects would be provided by his Industrial Light and Magic company. And you see in the supplements you see Lucas coming to Japan to look over one of the Van Gogh sequences, which is one of the great fantasy sequences in the movie, where the eye character gets lost or traverses the famous Van Gogh paintings. So, and then we get a booklet instead of the fold-out, which is always nice. And we see, just from the first segment, we see the Fox procession. And again, this is a film with many processions in it. Here is a shot of a sequence called The Tunnel, where the platoon leader confronts his platoon, all of which who were wiped out in a battle during World War II. We get a demon from the blizzard. This is a very beautiful and quite scary image of the men who are seemingly giving up, lost in this blizzard. Here we see Kurosawa amongst the peach blossoms, and a couple more here. Here is the peach orchard after it has been cut down. The eye character there, which is Kurosawa, there's one small bush of peach blossoms left. And then we get a replication of the crows, and this is the eye character who had followed Van Gogh up that pathway. They actually planted a wheat field about a year prior to the filming, so that it would a year later it would replicate the Van Gogh painting from which this shot is taken. We get the demons. This is the eye character confronting the demons with a giant dandelions in the background. Kurosawa confronting himself as a boy. It's the eye character as a boy. And then on the cover, we get Shishio Ryu leading the glorious funeral procession. So the movie starts with a fox wedding procession. It ends with a funeral procession, but in this village, it's a celebration. It's not a time of grieving, it's a time of celebrating life and the life of the person who has passed away. This is just absolutely brilliant, beautifully looking sequence. And Shishio Ryu, he was 84 at the time. He had to learn these long lines, long monologue, and he was terrified that he wouldn't be able to do it. So every time he rested while they were doing the setups, and he would lay down and sort of recite his dialogue. It goes on for minutes and minutes. And Kurosawa shot like he shot most of his scenes. He shot them in one take with 3 different cameras from different angles. And then in the editing, he would put it all together. So it looks like it's not all one take, but it actually is. So Shishio Ryu had to do, I think it's 8 minutes long, a monologue, and he is just absolutely fantastic in this movie. And it's just a great finale here. And again, part of the ecological message. Some people found dreams to be too didactic in these concerns, but they seem increasingly relevant as time progresses. This is 34 years ago. So what's on here? We have a Stephen Prince commentary. He wrote a book on Kurosawa, absolutely essential. This, by the way, is the rainbow that constructed by Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic. So we have this Stephen Prince commentary. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. His commentary on High and Low, earlier Kurosawa movie, is one of the great commentaries of all time. This is a good one too. And then we get a whole lot of other stuff. We get interviews from 2016 when the Blu-ray was released, with the production manager, the assistant director who had worked with Kurosawa on so many movies. Just invaluable stories and recollections. We get a 1-hour documentary by Kurosawa's translator. She would travel with Kurosawa everywhere in probably the last 20-25 years of his life, because he was being awarded all over the world, including at the Oscars. And she also wrote the subtitles to his movies. So that's about a 1 hour documentary, and she talks with so many different directors, Bernardo Bertolucci, and just a whole Bong Joon-ho, just another terrific documentary. Then we get a 2.5 hour behind-the-scenes documentary, and this is directed by Tomohiko Obayashi, who is famous as being the director of House, the Japanese House. I didn't think I was gonna be able to sit through 2.5 hours. The movie itself is about 95 minutes, but the behind the scenes is 2.5 hours, but I stuck with it. And one of the difficult things of watching this particular documentary is it is shot on video, and the video quality is not very good. So when we see clips from the film, especially if you've seen it, you know, even in the Blu-ray, but in the 4K, you know, these scenes look terrible. But there's interspersed is Obayashi's interview with Kurosawa, and I think shortly after the film was released, perhaps, and it's just extraordinary listening to Kurosawa as he recounts how he got into filmmaking. He tries to remember some of the films he's forgotten. It's a funny part where Obayashi, I think I Was Beautiful, I think was the name of the film, which I've never seen. And I like that. And Kurosawa says, "You do?" He says, I've never I can't watch that movie because my wife, who had evidently recently passed away, she was an actress in that film. And he confronts here his inability to portray women. He says the critics kept telling me that I was terrible at it, so I didn't even try to bother as time went by. Kurosawa had a great sense of humor. He's 80 years old. Again, he still has 2 more movies to make. So this is, you know, if you live in the U.S., there's a October flash sale coming up from Criterion itself, November sale coming up from Barnes & Noble, hopefully. And boy, this is one I highly, highly recommend. And so what's coming up next, I return to the transgressive era filmmaking, probably my favorite, late 60s through the 70s. Recent pickups from Kino, recent releases. 3 Into 2 Won't Go with Rod Steiger, Claire Bloom, Judy Geeson. Very transgressive. This is from '79, Hardcore, George C. Scott, searching as Ethan Edwards would for his lost daughter, lost to the world of hardcore pornography in 1979. Boy, very few films have been made about hardcore pornography and its effect on the we've got about 50 some years of hardcore pornography being part of people's lives. And then the final one, Unmin, Vittering, and Zigo. This is David Hemmings. I think this is David Hemmings' production company. I think it's from '71, '72. Set in a boys' school. I'm expecting transgressive drama from this one as well. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.